So before we begin, here's your Lewis fun fact for this week. C.S. Lewis once described the experience of grief as feeling a lot like fear. Not sadness exactly, just fear. A fluttering in the stomach, a restlessness, a need to swallow. He wrote that in the opening lines of A Grief Observed. And what strikes me about it is that he didn't reach for first a theological framework. He just first described what it felt like in his body. That understanding is part of what makes him one of the most trustworthy guides I know to the territory we're entering today. Hello, fellow Inklings, and welcome back to The Eagle and Child. Today we're talking about something nobody asked for and most of us spend an enormous amount of time and energy trying to avoid. We're talking about lament and about the difference between pain and suffering, and about why the most courageous thing you might do with your pain is not fix it, but to bring it honestly to God. I want to start with some of my own personal story. About 25 years ago, I lived with chronic back pain for roughly, 7, 8 years. Pain that ran from my lower back all the way down both legs, and I could feel the numbness in my feet. I tried everything I could do to make it stop. Chiropractic care, massage therapy, energy healing, prayer over me, including warfare prayer, and even back surgery. Nothing worked. And underneath all of it lived a persistent fear that something more serious was going on that was undiagnosed. I eventually made my way to the Mayo Clinic. Their conclusion was that I had something called myofascial pain syndrome. And then the doctor added, almost as an afterthought, that most people with this diagnosis also have generalized anxiety disorder. Now that landed hard because I know I did. What became clear was that my anxiety about the pain had been making it significantly worse. Not imaginary, but amplified by my desperate need to understand it, to control it, and to find the one thing that would just finally make it stop. I have memories from that season of literally lying in the basement in the fetal position, bringing to God what Henry David Thoreau once called quiet desperation. That particular kind of suffering that has no voice, no audience, nowhere really to go. What I did not yet understand then was that the quiet may be part of the problem. The invitation I did not yet know how to accept was not to suffer more quietly, but to bring my lament out loud, to stop protecting God from the full weight of what I was carrying and simply just tell him the truth. And then gradually and without clear explanation, for some reason the pain went away. I cannot tell you what helped the most, and I hold that mystery with gratitude rather than any kind of certainty. What I can tell you is that the experience left me with two things I did not have before. First, a deep compassion for anyone living with chronic pain, and a hard-won understanding of how much suffering I'd been adding to my own pain through my desperate need to control it and fix it. That experience taught me a distinction I want to share with you, because I think it matters enormously. Pain and suffering are not the same thing. Pain is the unavoidable cost of just being alive in a world where things break and bodies and minds fail. You cannot pray it entirely away. You cannot be faithful enough or careful enough to avoid it. Pain is simply part of what it means to be human. Suffering is something we add to the pain. It's the layer that arrives when we fight the reality of what is happening. We demand that life be something other than it is. When we cannot fix the pain, cannot explain it, cannot predict when it will end, pain becomes suffering. Now I want to be careful here because this distinction can be used cruelly, and I do not want to do that. I'm not saying your suffering is optional. What I'm suggesting is something that can happen alongside your seeking of relief, a gradual, imperfect loosening of the grip, a willingness to be present to what is actually happening rather than only fighting to make it stop. Please keep seeking relief. Keep going to the doctor, keep praying for healing. None of that's a failure of your faith. There may also be an invitation when we are ready for it towards surrender and letting go rather than just control. Not giving up, just releasing the demand that we be the ones to fix it. One quick note before we go further. In everyday speech, pain and suffering are used interchangeably, and I will use them that way throughout this video and throughout this series. So the distinction I just drew is not about policing language, the pain and suffering. It's about noticing that much of what we carry as suffering includes an extra layer of resistance we have added to the underlying pain. If that helps you, then carry it. Great. If it feels too neat for what you are living through right now, then just set it aside. The real invitation here has less to do with vocabulary and more to do with our posture. A psychiatrist named Viktor Frankl survived the concentration camps in Germany, and what he observed there became one of the most important insights of the 20th century. He noticed that the ones who survived inwardly were often not the strongest. They were the ones who had found a meaning, something that gave their suffering a context larger than the suffering itself. He later wrote that the greatest tragedy is not the suffering. The greatest tragedy is suffering without any meaning. I think that points towards something the Christian tradition has always known, but sometimes forgotten to say. The question is not only how we escape our pain, but whether our pain can be held inside a story large enough to give it some purpose and meaning. That's not a technique. It's closer to what we'll call hope. And it is, I would suggest, exactly what lament is reaching for. Most of us were taught that the right response to suffering is to fix it, fight it, or explain it. We bring the problem to God in prayer and expect a result. When the result doesn't come, we conclude we didn't pray hard enough, our faith was insufficient, or God just isn't listening. But look at what the Bible actually models. Job did not respond to catastrophic loss by trying harder or believing more correctly. He argued with God and just demanded some answers. Or consider Jesus in Gethsemane the night before his crucifixion, asking the Father to take away the cup if there were any other way. He did not manage his stress with theological composure. He brought it unfiltered directly to God. My God, why have you forsaken me? The biblical tradition endorses something far less tidy than control. It endorses lament. The Psalms understood this. The single most common type of psalm is not praise, it's lament. Scholars estimate roughly a third of the Psalms is lament, and some of them are extraordinarily raw. Psalm 88 ends with no resolution, no turn toward hope. It ends simply, darkness is my closest friend. Psalm 88:18. To lament is to tell the truth to God, full, unedited truth about what you're experiencing, without softening it, without protecting God from the weight of it. Lament is not venting into the void. It's a prayer addressed to someone, and the fact that it is addressed to God is in itself an act of faith, because you not lament to a God that you've stopped believing in. I want to share two books that have helped me inhabit this whole territory differently. Both written anonymously centuries ago by people whose names we'll never know. That anonymity feels fitting. Suffering strips away the need to be impressive. The first is a small Russian book from the 19th century called The Way of the Pilgrim, which follows an unnamed wanderer who discovers something called the Jesus Prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. And of course, that comes from Scripture. A short, simple sentence repeated slowly and rhythmically until it becomes less something you say and more just something that kind of breathes inside of you. One of the hardest features of suffering is the way the mind keeps just returning to it, rehearsing it, projecting it forward over and over. The Jesus Prayer offers not a denial of the pain, but a gentle just redirection toward the only presence that can actually hold it. The second book is a 14th century English book called The Cloud of Unknowing, whose author was never identified. Its central argument is that God cannot be reached by thinking alone. Eventually, our theological frameworks can become a barrier. The way through is not more thinking, but a simple, wordless reaching toward God in the darkness, without demanding that the darkness explain itself first. For anyone sitting with suffering that will not resolve and cannot be explained, that is permission to stop trying to think your way through what cannot be thought through, and simply to rest in God who is present even when silent. There's something I've found more sustaining than any theological explanation. Human beings can endure almost anything if they do not feel alone in it. This is what Job's friends got right before they got it so badly wrong. They sat with him in silence for 7 days. No explanations, no theology, just presence. It was when they opened their mouths that they made everything worse. The Christian claim at its deepest level is not that God will explain your suffering, it is that God will be present in it. Emmanuel, God with us, not dispensing answers from a safe distance, but alongside us, inside the same darkness with us. This is called solidarity in our suffering, and is one of the things I most adore about the Christian tradition. When Jesus cries out from the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?" He's not performing theology. He is suffering. And in that moment, every person who has ever felt abandoned by God has a companion in their abandonment. That may be the most important thing in this entire series: solidarity with God. C.S. Lewis arrived at something like this after months of grief. After all the anger and the silence and the feeling of the bolted door, he wrote that going to God with his questions produced not an explanation, but something else entirely. Not a locked door, he said, but a silent certainty, not uncompassionate gaze. It was as though God shook his head, not in refusal, but in a way that a parent might say, "Peace, child, you don't understand, just not yet." Lewis did not get his explanation, but he got presence. And somehow, eventually, that was enough. What if the invitation is not to get on top of your suffering, but to go into it? Not to fight it, but to feel it fully. Not to explain it, but to bring it unedited and unresolved to the God who made you and who has not looked away from you or for a single moment or of your pain. For now, the invitation is simply this: tell God the truth, all of it, without editing, without apology, without waiting until you feel faithful enough. You're already faithful enough. The lament itself is the prayer. Fellow Inklings, until next week, wherever you're carrying your pain today, quietly or not so quietly, may you find the courage to stop protecting God from it. Bring it out loud. He can hold it. He has been waiting for you to bring it. Go in peace.